I Don't Want a Haircut by Daniel Errico. Illustrated by Helda Clara. Sammy and haircuts didn't get along. I don't need a haircut, he would always argue. One day, Sammy got his worst haircut yet. After that, he decided he would never get another haircut again. For a while, he loved his long hair. It grew past his eyes, and he liked how it blew in every direction when it was windy outside. It grew past his nose, and he liked how it moved when he shook his head around. It grew past his chin, and he didn't miss the barber at all. But as his hair got longer, some things got harder. It was harder for Sammy to see, since the hair covered his eyes. He ate 2 stacks of napkins before he realized they weren't pancakes. It was harder for Sammy to wash his hair, since it was so long. In the shower, he found 2 potato chips and a paperclip stuck in his hair. It was even harder for Sammy to wear hats. His baseball cap couldn't possibly fit on a head with so much hair. It grew past his shoulders, and Sammy didn't know what to do with it. It grew past his belly button, and Sammy wasn't enjoying his long hair as much as he used to. It grew past his feet, and Sammy kept tripping over it. Sammy was not so happy with his long hair anymore. Finally, one morning his parents had enough, so they marched up to his room to take him to the barber. But by that time, his hair had filled up the entire room, and it was still growing. Sammy squeezed out the front door, and his hair followed behind him. He sat in the back seat of the car, and his hair dragged behind him. His parents sat him in the barber chair, and his hair filled up the entire shop. When the haircut was over, Sammy felt great. Jerry's Box by Daniel Errico. Illustrated by Helda Clara. Jerry woke up on a Monday. He grabbed a box he was keeping under his bed. When he came downstairs, his parents asked him what was inside. "Something really fun," he said, but nothing more. Jerry walked to the bus stop with the box in his hands. Everybody at the bus stop asked him what was in it. "It's very important," he said, but nothing more. When he got to school, his teacher asked him what was in the box. "It's a secret," he said, but nothing more. At lunch, his friends all crowded around and asked him to open it. "I can't. It's a gift," he said, but nothing more. The box sat with him all day, and no one in class could think about anything else. His teacher didn't let Jerry know, but she was curious too. She decided to send him to the principal for disturbing the class, hoping to get an answer. The principal asked Jerry what he was keeping in the box. "It's not for you," he said, but nothing more. Jerry went back to class and sat down. The entire class was watching as he handed the teacher a note from the principal. "Well, if it's a gift, Jerry, I suggest you deliver it now." Jerry turned around and faced the class. He walked down the aisle and stopped at the desk of Oscar. Before today, nobody paid attention to Oscar. Nobody even talked to Oscar. And nobody had ever stopped at Oscar's desk. Until now. Oscar's eyes lit up. Jerry handed him the box with a new note. Oscar read the note. Dear Oscar, this is my box. Enjoy. P.S. It works better if you don't open it. On Tuesday, nobody had more people at their desk than Oscar. The Particular Way of the Odd Miss McKay, written by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Michiko Cayce. Say what you will or say what you may, there's nobody else who is like Miss McKay. To all whom she passes, she gives a good day, and she's ready with maps if you've been led astray. Her hair is bright orange with 2 streaks of gray, and her purse may be made out of flowers and clay, but her hugs have been known to go on for a day, and she wakes up each morning with something to say. She had her house built in a tree by the bay, and dangles a tire swing down every May. She's famous for making a carrot souffle. She'll give you 5 boxes but won't let you pay. She only eats food that's served on a tray, and she doesn't use forks since they get in her way. She owns 7 horses and rides in a sleigh, and when she addresses them, it's with a neigh. She'll lend you her coat without any delay. She wove it from flowers and piles of hay. On Sundays, she puts on a purple beret, and never, not once, has she missed the ballet. Her voice is quite bad, but she sings every day. If she's holding her trumpet, don't ask her to play. I think you should meet her as soon as today, although if you stop by, she'll insist that you stay. So say what you will or say what you may, you'll remember the day that you met Miss McKay. The Island of Bumbumbuloo, written by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Courtney Jentzen. Have you sailed to the island of Bumbumbuloo? It's something that all great explorers must do. 10 years ago, I set off with my crew in search of the island of Bumbumbuloo. The waves on the sea made me wish that I flew to get to that island of Bumbumbuloo. The path on my map led us slightly askew, and we sailed every ocean before we were through. But when we arrived, it was then that I knew that all of the stories I heard must be true. The water surrounding it shone a bright hue, a magnificent color like no other blue. A sign made with vines held together by glue stood on the shore, reading, "We welcome you." The king had arranged for a great big to-do, and the queen herself shouted the loudest, "Woohoo!" The Bumbumbulites gave us bowls of their stew, which they made from the roots of the great bumbadoo. The food could have fed 702 at the feast on the island of Bumbumbuloo. Our drinks were quite tasty, a tropical brew. If you ask what was in them, I haven't a clue. They served us desserts made with bumberry goo, as we danced to the tune of the didgeridoo. We all thanked the king for the party he threw, of course not forgetting to thank the queen too. From their palace they showed us the wonderful view, and we saw all the fields where the bumberries grew. As gifts I gave both of them gumballs to chew. When they asked me for more, I had only a few. So we hopped on the ship where we kept a whole slew, but it got carried off when the northern wind blew. The island has waited to be found anew, while I search for someone to give the map to. And now I've decided to pass it to you, to discover the island of Bumbumbuloo. How Firefly Got His Light, written by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Darina Yamoldinova. Long ago, there was no such thing as nighttime. Sun and moon were the best of friends, and they never left the sky. Moon looked after the quiet oceans, and sun shone brightly over all the land. Elephant lived on the plains. The sunlight made his skin very hot. He tried to cool off in a mud bath, but sun dried it up. He tried fanning himself, but his ears got tired. One day he called out to Sun, "You dry the ground and burn my feet. I cannot stand this awful heat." But Sun did not listen, and Moon did not say a word. Owl lived in a tall tree in the forest. She could not hunt in the sunlight. She tried to catch Mouse for dinner, but Mouse saw her coming and ran away. She tried eating berries instead, but they did not fill her up. One day she called out to Sun, "Mouse can see me in the light. I cannot hunt with you so bright." But Sun did not listen, and Moon did not say a word. Baby Turtle hatched on the beach by the ocean. To reach the sea, he needed the tides to pull him in. He tried to swim out, but the waves pushed him back on shore. He waited for the tides to come, but they never did. One day, he called out to Moon, "I need the tides to reach the seas. I beg of you to bring them, please." Moon heard the animals, and she asked Sun if there was a way they could help them. Sun cared deeply for Moon, and he agreed. Together, they came up with a plan. Sun called down to all the animals, "For the sake of Elephant, Owl, and Baby Turtle, Moon and I have decided to share the sky. When I rise, Moon will set and leave the sky bright. When Moon rises, I will set and leave the sky dark. Moon will bring the tides each day as she travels through the sky, and it will be cool and dark," Sun continued. "And when I rise, I will once again make the sky bright. But we need one of you to tell us when it is time for us to switch." "It cannot be me," said Elephant, "for I am forgetful." And this was a lie. "It cannot be me," said Owl, "for I cannot be trusted." And this was the truth. "It cannot be me," said Baby Turtle, "for I am just a baby." And this could not be argued. One by one, the animals declined, except for Dullfly, who was resting in the shade of a banana leaf. Sun shone his great heat on Dullfly and spoke to him in a booming voice. "Dullfly, this is Sun. Do you hear me? From now on, you will tell me when it is time for me to set, and we will call it dusk. And you will tell Moon when it is time for her to set, and we will call it dawn." "I cannot," Dullfly said, frightened by Sun's loud command. "I am too small for you to see." Sun exhaled and shot a burst of light straight into Dullfly's body, making it glow brightly. "There! From now on, you will be known as Firefly, and you will flash your light to send us a signal," said Sun. And from that day forth, Firefly did just that. So, if you happen to catch Firefly at dawn or dusk, you must be sure to let him go, because it is he who decides when Moon brings the tides, and when Sun rises and sets. By the African river, known as the Nile, the sun fell away, and it rested a while. The rhinos had braved all the smoldering heat. They lay down to sleep as they wiped off their feet. The elephants marched to their elephant beds, and gently they rested their elephant heads. The hippos went bathing in cool, shallow pools, thinking the rhinos and elephants fools. Slowly the hippos sank into the river, the water so cold that it gave them a shiver. Hippos can't swim, like the pelicans think. They also can't float. They could easily sink. Underwater, they fell to the soft river bed, on darkish green plants, with a smidgen of red.
They strolled on the bottom, then bounced up for air. They did it for hours, without any care. The fish followed closely, and wove in and out, under their belly and up to their snout. Each of the hippos came up to the shore, to feed on the grass by the river once more. They dried off their bodies by shaking and stomping, and took bites of grass, chewing and chomping. With night fading fast, they were full from the feast. The sun returned back, rising up from the east. The hippos crept off to collapse for the day, while rhinos and elephants got up to play, enjoying the warmth of the sun and its light, never knowing the story of hippos at night.
Why the Cricket Chirps by Daniel Errico. Illustrated by Darina Yamoldinova. Before there were seasons, the cricket could fly. He flew faster than the bumblebee. He flew higher than the falcon. And he flew fancier than the flying marmaduck, who was quite a fancy flyer. The cricket had flown all over the world. He flew to the east. Then he flew to the west. And then he flew to the south. But he had never flown north. The ant tried to warn him that he should not try. "It's very cold up north," said the ant. "Too cold for an ant, and too cold for a cricket." The cricket, however, did not listen, because crickets do whatever they want. He set off for the north that very night. It did not take him long to get there, because he was such a fantastically fast and fancy flyer. The cricket landed next to a pine tree as the sun began setting. There was snow everywhere he looked. There was snow on the trees. There was snow on the ground. And there was snow on top of the mountains. The moose came walking over to him very slowly. "Oh, hello," said the moose. "Bundle up. Nighttime is coming." The cricket did not listen, because crickets do whatever they want. He flew up into a pine tree to settle in for a good sleep. He did this quickly, because he is such an incredibly fast and fancy flyer. The owl came flying over to the same branch. "You should find some shelter for the cold night," said the owl. The cricket did not listen, because crickets do whatever they want. He decided to rest on a pile of twigs. He was sleepier than he had ever been, from all the remarkably fast and fancy flying. The cricket slept all through the night until morning. When he woke up, he was ready to go home and tell the ant about his trip. He hopped high in the air to start flying, but he couldn't. Instead, he fell right back into the snow. He hopped again, even higher this time, but his wings would not work. They had frozen solid during the cold night. He tried to warm them up by rubbing them together, but it was no use. The cricket had to hop all the way home. It took him days and days to return. By the time he got back, his wings had almost become unfrozen. When he rubbed them together this time, they made a chirping noise that no one in the forest had ever heard before. And every time he rubbed his wings together, they chirped a little bit louder and got a little less frozen. But it is important to know, dear reader, that wings are special and fragile things. This is why the greatest care should always be taken around them. They are not meant to be frozen, and once they are, they may never be the same again. Even though the cricket's wings were no longer frozen, he still could not fly. And ever since then, the cricket stays on the ground like his friend the ant, and hops from place to place. And now the cricket is the fastest and fanciest hopper there is. At nighttime, you can hear him chirping, from rubbing his wings together to keep warm. But he is doing much more than just that. The cricket is telling you how warm or cold it is by chirping. He chirps faster when it is warm, and slower when it is cold. This way, you will not make the same mistake that he did. However, that is only if you decide to listen. Dolbear's law states that if you count the number of times a cricket chirps in 15 seconds and add 40, it will give you roughly the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Mr. McKay, the Winter Coat Thief, written by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Michiko Cayce. Mr. McKay is a fellow most strange. His hair and his mustache will magically change. He doesn't like dogs or other such beasts, and steals all the napkins from picnic feasts. You'll know that it's him from his lemon-lime eyes, unless he is wearing his sunglass disguise. Of course you could tell by his grassy green pants. They're made in the fall by a team of red ants. He lives in an igloo, which makes little sense, while 2 pet iguanas sleep outside in tents. In the morning he climbs up the dewy dug trees, then he lays on the grass where he talks to the bees. In the winter is when you must keep a keen eye, to see if he's lurking or skipping nearby. For he'll take both his hands and he'll rub them together. He does it quite fast, since they're light as a feather. He heats up the air, then he sends it your way, making you think it's an oddly warm day. But I warn you, my friends, do not fall for his ploy. He's after your coat in a manner quite coy. If you do take it off, he will rustle the leaves. You'll put down your coat and look up at the trees. And that's when he'll grab it, that winter coat thief, before you can notice the drop of one leaf. So it's best, in the winter, to leave your coat on, or else when you need it, you'll find that it's gone.
Are those your donuts? My name is Walter. May I have a donut? Thank you. I might get hungry later. How about another one? You still have a lot. I think that blue one is mine. I left it here yesterday. My doctor says that I need more donuts. He's a doctor. What's that? I feel bad. That last donut looks lonely. I'm sorry for taking your donuts. Sharing is about giving, not just taking. I understand now.
Are you a robot? Only robots are allowed in here. If you are a robot, then will you make robot noises with me? Bleep.
Gong.
Wow, those are good robot voices. Hey, is that a robot? Well, they made robot noises with me. Even...
Gong.
Yep. You can make noises, but can you move like a robot? Those moves are even better than mine. Hey, is that a robot? We think so. I know how to find out. The one thing robots do best is go to sleep. We will show you first. I am getting sleepy. I am a sleepy robot. Powering down. I am a sleepy robot. Powering down. I am a sleepy robot. Powering down. Your turn.
The Story of Yes and No, written by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Ricky Audie. Before words were words, a boy named Yes lived in a small village in a small kingdom. Yes was good at everything. He was the best, smartest, and most liked person in his village. Yes had a brother, and his name was No. No was jealous of his brother, because he was not much good at anything himself. Whenever the villagers asked No for help, he refused, because he didn't like people very much. Whenever someone asked Yes for a favor, he would gladly help, and he secretly didn't mind the fact that it irritated No when he did. One day, Yes and No's father, McKay, went on a long journey, and he left his 2 sons in charge of all the animals. Yes took good care of the great guck, and the ix, and the 3-toed yak. Keep in mind, my dear friend, that the guck, ick, and 3-toed yak were very old animals, so you might know them by different names today. No didn't want to be bothered with the boring tasks involved with taking care of the animals, so instead of helping his brother, No went down to the lake and threw rocks into the water. A few days after his father left, Yes asked his brother to watch the 3-toed yak while he went to find some food to eat. Instead of doing what Yes asked, No lay down, shut his eyes, and forgot about the yak. It just so happened that the king had a personal road nearby, and he traveled on it often. So often that when the 3-toed yak wandered onto the road, the king's carriage was passing by and had to swerve to avoid hitting it. The king was thrown from the carriage and fell to the ground and hurt himself. The king demanded to know why a 3-toed yak had been allowed on his road, and asked all the villagers for an explanation. Yes was always honest, so he told the king the entire story. The king thought for a moment, and then he came up with an idea that he was quite happy with. Yes and No were to work in the castle as his personal assistants, as punishment for what was later referred to as the worst 3-toed yak and carriage accident in the kingdom's history. The king needed help with many things around the castle, because a king cannot be bothered with the daily tasks involved with running a kingdom. However, soon after his decision about the 2 brothers, the king realized that only Yes would be of any use to him as a servant. Whenever the king asked No to bring him anything, it would get thrown away, broken, or eaten, without exception. The king was quite sure that No was the worst servant in the entire world. The brothers' most important task was to help pick the food for a grand party that the king was throwing later that night. Cooks from all over the kingdom lined up at the castle's gate to offer the king their food for the party. Of course, the king could not go and grab the food himself, so he asked Yes and No to do it for him. The first cook came up to the gate and yelled to the gatekeeper, "I bring delicious ugberry pie for the king's banquet." The king heard this and thought that the ugberry pie would be perfect for such an event, and he would love to eat the leftovers. He didn't want anything to happen to the ugberry pie, so he yelled, "Yes!" and then asked him to go fetch it. The next cook stepped up to the gate. "I offer the king grookey soup," he said. The king didn't like groupie soup very much, and he knew just how to get rid of it. "No!" he yelled, and then sent No out to retrieve the soup. No dropped the soup before the king could even smell it. This went on for hours. If the king liked a dish, he would yell, "Yes!" and it would be included in the night's feast. If he did not, everyone would hear a loud, "No!" and the dish would be destroyed moments later by a servant with a very bad attitude. Pretty soon this started catching on around the kingdom, for if a king does something, his loyal subjects are never far behind. If they didn't want a second scoop of potatoes, they would say, "No." And if they liked what someone was offering, they would say, "Yes." And ever since that day in a small village, in a small kingdom, yes has meant yes, and no has meant no. This small kingdom also happens to be the birthplace of Yes and No's cousins, Please and Thanks.
But that is another story for another time.
When the universe was young, the sky was filled with planets, and stars, and stardust, and many, many rocks. One of these rocks was a bit more special than the rest. She was unlike any that came before her. She was a kind and happy rock, who always floated near a big blue planet. Sometimes, when the light hit her surface, she would glow a brilliant green. And at times like those, she almost didn't look like a rock at all. As the sky moved from day to day and week to week, the rock would see planets, far off in the distance. She would wonder what it would be like to go to them. Week after week and month after month, she would wonder. Until one day when she decided to go find out. The rock had never gone anywhere before and wasn't sure how to go about it. She started to rock back and forth. Then she started to spin. Soon enough, she was flying through the sky. As she left, clouds swirled on the big blue planet. For it was sad to see her go, and when planets cry, there is a rainstorm. At first the rock was not good at moving. She would spin too far to the right or too far to the left. Slowly, she learned how to travel whichever direction she liked, and she enjoyed exploring space. She saw a planet filled with water, with not a speck of land. Then found a planet all dried up, with beaches made of sand. She swore she met a planet who looked suspiciously like her. And then she saw a planet that was, well, she wasn't sure. One planet she discovered had grown forests made of green. Another one was very shy, not fond of being seen. She flew right by a planet that was frozen, icy cold. And then she saw a planet that was made of jewels and gold. She had started to notice that each planet seemed brighter than the last. They were all so different, and all so pretty. It became hard for her to decide where to go next. If each planet she visited was more beautiful than the one before it, then how could she decide which way to go next? And how could she decide where to stay? So she continued traveling, afraid to miss a single planet. Eventually, she came upon the big blue planet that she had once circled, but she found that it was not the same. It was shining in a way that it never had before. It was more blue than it had ever been, and certainly more beautiful. This made her stop for a moment. "I do not know where I should go next," she said out loud. "Each direction is filled with wonderful planets, and I cannot stop, knowing that the next planet will be even more beautiful if I continue on. Even my big blue planet has grown more beautiful every day in my absence." The big blue planet overheard this. "Can you not see why I am brighter?" it asked. "You are the brightest planet I have ever seen," she said. "But I do not know why you glow brighter today than you did when I left you." "You have brightened me," it said. "But I am just a rock," she replied. "You are no longer just a rock like the day you left me," said the big blue planet. "You have grown bold and bright. Now you are a shooting star, and you are the reason that I shine. And while you are worrying about which direction to go, all of the planets in space are hoping that you will come their way to brighten them." And so the shooting star, who was no longer just a rock, finally understood. It did not matter where she went. The light was her own. So the rock sat there for a moment, by the bright blue planet, and wondered, should I keep traveling? Or should I fly around the big blue planet and grow brighter with it each day? She thought until she knew exactly what to do. The wolves in the woods grow as wild as trees. They do not say thank you. They do not say please. They roll in the dirt, and they chomp, and they growl. At nighttime, they look at the moon, and they howl. But Warren was different, the youngest wolf pup. He would not go howl. He would not look up. Instead, he ran back to his cave to go hide. And you would not believe what would happen inside. The brightest full moon would cause Warren to change from a furry young wolf to a creature most strange. His hair would grow short and run right to his head. His paws would spread out and form fingers instead. His snout would shrink down to a small little nub, while his ears became small, like a one-day-old cub. His teeth would unsharpen, like pieces of corn, and always, somehow, there were clothes to be worn. He'd stand on two legs and start walking around, and on his behind, not a tail to be found. His parents were shocked when they saw him transform. It certainly, wolfenly, wasn't the norm. Warren became a polite, quiet joy, for Warren, you see, was a dreaded Wereboy. He'd only eat sandwiches, without the crust. He didn't talk back. He preferred earning trust. They scratched at their heads when he cleaned up the cave. It wasn't how wolves had been taught to behave. His bedtime, he found, was just one tad too late, so he marched off to sleep without any debate. Instead of the floor, he would sleep on a bed, leaves for a blanket, and straw for his head. By morning he'd be a young wolf pup again. They all kept the secret together. But then, a pack celebration to honor Sinclair, the eldest of wolves, with the whitest of hair. When it came time to howl, they all looked around, but the family of Warren was not to be found. They came to the cave and asked why they had hid, and that's when they saw him, a kid. "A wereboy!" they shouted. "What do we do?" "Don't get too close, or then you'll catch it too." Warren sat patiently, reading his books, but somehow that made them give wolfier looks. His parents objected. "There's nothing to fear. Everyone changes, each one of us here. Warren's the wolf that you all knew before. It's just that he happens to be that, and more." Sinclair stepped ahead, with his scraggly knees. "Excuse me," he creaked, with a cough and a wheeze. "I have just the test, and will know the truth soon. All wolves, be they true, howl up at the moon." So the pack gathered round, and they brought him outside, and Warren did something he hadn't yet tried. He lifted his head, and he puffed out his chest, looked straight at the moon, and he gave it his best, and from inside his heart, where it lay all along, came not a howl, but a beautiful song. Soon, one by one, all the wolves sat to listen, until morning dew on the grass came to glisten. His parents, Sinclair, and the wolves from his pack watched the sun change him from wereboy to back, and they saw him, this time, as they had not before, a wolf and a boy, and forever much more. The Journey of the Marmabill. Written by Daniel Errico. Illustrated by Tiffany Terrell. Published by Sky Pony Press. A Marmabill was searching on the rainy forest floor. She came up to a tree that had a tiny wooden door. She traveled very far, and where she was, she didn't know. She'd never been so scared and wasn't sure which way to go. She gave a gentle knock, and 20 wugs came rolling out. When wugs hear any noise, they want to hear what it's about. I'm looking for a creature. He has run off with my nest. But now I've lost my way, and I could use a place to rest. If he has come this way, I'm sure you'll find him on this path. But we have beds and lots of food and, oh my, a bath. The wugs got started cooking, and they filled a tub of bubbles. Leaf and flower bubble baths are sure to ease your troubles. They served up nuts and stew, and she devoured every bite, and played some toss the wugs until they fell asleep mid-flight. Please don't go, they pleaded when she thanked them for her stay. Still she said, I may be lost, but I am on my way. The Marmabill walked over logs and under heavy brush. Her tiny legs were moving fast, like she was in a rush. She stopped for just a moment by a lazy flowing river and ate some berry snacks the wugs were nice enough to give her. Do you mind? The ground exclaimed from underneath her rear. The ground just spoke, she said out loud. I'm going mad, I fear. I'm not the ground, the voice declared, while rising from the dirt. I'm just a tankadiggy. When you sat on me, it hurt. The Marmabill apologized and offered him some food. She hadn't meant to squish him. She was anything but rude. I'm looking for my home, she said, and he responded, Why? A wildebeest has taken it, and she began to cry. I saw one pass me by, and he was carrying a sack. I knew it, said the Marmabill. I've gotten back on track. Following the river, she went far along the bank, but did not see the Kikis who had set a nasty prank. She fell inside a hole that they had covered up with plants. They chuckled from the trees while building stacks of army ants. She slipped along a muddy slide that traveled underground, and when it stopped, that Marmabill was all mixed up around. More confused than ever, she was in a darkened cave, but being lost and scared is what will teach you to be brave. She couldn't see a thing, but she could hear as well as ever, giving her a thought that was as odd as it was clever. She grabbed a bunch of rocks and started throwing here and there, and when they hit a wall or dip, the sound would tell her where. She walked along, that is until she threw one at the ceiling. It made a funny sound that gave her quite a scary feeling. Instead of hitting stone, she hit a soundly sleeping fluther. Soon its eyes lit up and started waking up another. 100 fluthers fluttered down, glowing emerald green. Having just been woken, they were acting cranky mean. They chased her down a tunnel till she ended up outside. A fluther pulled her by the tail and took her for a ride. She grabbed a branch while flying by and managed to break free, and found herself on top of a banana bonza tree. I see him, said the Marmabill, that thieving wildebeest. He sat beneath a waterfall she spotted to the east. She grabbed the nearest vine and started swinging through the air, but when she reached the wildebeest, he gave an icy stare. Give me back my nest, she yelled in quite a shaky voice. She may have been afraid, but she had made a mighty choice. The wildebeest came charging. He was in a foul mood. Wildebeests are known to have a fiery attitude. When she looked for cover, it was then she recognized that she was near a kiki trap, cleverly disguised. As she jumped away, the wildebeest went running by. He fell into the trap, and he was hoisted to the sky. "Let me down," he shouted, as he dangled from a net. "You stole my home," she answered, "and now this is what you get." Her nest was trampled underfoot, but she knew what to do. After all she'd done, she wasn't scared to start anew. She started finding twigs and built a home that made her proud. Wugs and kikis welcome, but no wildebeests allowed.
Far below the ocean waves, a Gnarble lay in bed. All night long his Gnarble dreams kept swimming in his head. He dreamt a dream of swimming up to see the sky above, lit up by the sun in colors he just knew he'd love. But Gnarbles never swam that high. Their fins were much too small. Their tails were thin and floppy, which didn't help at all. This Gnarble liked his fins and had no problem with his tail, so when he woke he knew that he just wouldn't fail. I'm swimming up above the waves to see the sky of blue. I've never seen it even once, and now it's time I do. The other Gnarbles warned him that he shouldn't swim so high, as did the Blyfish family that always swam close by. No Gnarbles ever swum that high. It simply isn't done. A Blyfish might just make the trip, but we know you're not one. Gnarbles don't have flappers like all us Blyfish do. You don't even have coggers like the swimming Gungaloo. But the Gnarble didn't listen, and he left his friends behind. No silly Blyfish family could ever change his mind. He swam up past the boulders made of spongy gishy-gosh and flew right by the herd of floating, feeding Fipplefosh. His fins were getting tired, but he knew he couldn't stop, so he kept swimming faster, trying hard to reach the top. Just then a hungry Warkle blocked the Gnarble with his fin. He grabbed him by his tail and brought him right up to his chin.
"I've never had a Gnarble. This would be a tasty treat. But you're much too thin and bony for a fish like me to eat."
So the Gnarble just kept swimming and didn't dare to stop until he heard the sound of a great big bubble. He turned around to see that he was in a bit of trouble. The sound he heard was that of a silver subbalubble. The Gnarble tried to hide somewhere that he could safely stay, but the subbalubble saw him and was headed right his way. "Oh, Mr. Subbalubble, please don't eat me up for lunch. I'll bring a yummy plant instead for you to sit and munch." I've never seen a Gnarble try to swim this high before. What is it, little fishy, that you're up here looking for? If I could see the sky just once, I'd be a happy fish. To do one flip above the waves would be my only wish. Well, sorry, silly Gnarble, but I cannot let you go. It's Subbalubble dinner time. You should have stayed below. The Gnarble cowered back in fear and shook from fin to fin. But then he saw a school of fish called Shiny Glimmyglin. The Glimmyglin swam right past the Subbalubble's face, and the Gnarble grabbed a glimmy fin and quickly left that place. The Gnarble swam up higher still until he saw some light. He knew it had to be the sun, and oh, was it a sight! Closely by, a plink was sleeping, lying on his back. He rubbed his giant belly as he dreamed about a snack. The Gnarble smiled happily and set his fins a-swimming. He didn't see the plink wake up, for he was busy grinning. The Gnarble almost made it to the surface of the sea, but the plink chomped down and swallowed him as if he were a pea. The Gnarble sat inside the plink and started softly crying. He'd never make it out, so was there any point in trying? The Gnarble knew he'd come too close to quit and give up now. There must be some way out of here. There's got to be somehow. So the Gnarble swam around inside, trying very hard to think. And while he did, his floppy tail was tickling the plink. The plink was very ticklish, and he couldn't hold it in. He tried to cover up his laugh with his giant plinkish fin. His mouth was open long enough for the Gnarble to swim free. He swam so fast the hungry plink did not have time to see. Far above the ocean floor, above the Gnarble's homes, above the blyfish families and dancing water gnomes, above the swimming gungaloo and slimy dundledun, a Gnarble flipped above the waves and smiled at the sun.
I must warn you, this book is atrocious. The characters are odd, and one of the pages has sprung a leak. Even some of the order are in the wrong words. It is the worst of the worst, so don't say I didn't warn you. Our story begins with an atrocious king. None of his rules made any sense.
Tuesday, said the king. There is no such day, and I'll hear no more of it.
From that day on in his kingdom, Monday was followed by Second Monday or First Wednesday. His daughter was an atrocious princess. She was not fancy and polite like most princesses, despite taking princess lessons each day. She never brushed her hair. She smelled of month-old bananas, and she was very devious. She even set traps inside this story. One day, the princess went missing. In her place there was a note that read, "I've taken the princess. You me catch never will." After reading the note twice, the king commanded the greatest hero in the land to find his daughter. The greatest hero in the land happened to be an atrocious hero. He was often too frightened to leave his home and got scared by butterflies. However, he had once defeated 2 caterpillars and a moth in a single battle, and this made him the greatest of all the heroes in the land. The hero rode to the castle of the meanest villain in the kingdom. But the villain, too, was atrocious. He brought flowers to old ladies whenever he could, and out of the kindness of his heart, he once built a house for someone who needed it. The hero. The hero stormed the gate and charged into the dungeon of the villain's castle. "Surrender the princess," he yelled while shaking in his armor.
I don't have a princess,
said the villain.
I use this dungeon to bake cookies. But watch your step, because there's a leak.
The hero was more confused than usual. "If you didn't take the princess, then who did?" asked the hero.
We should go ask the dragon what he thinks.
Mind you, this was an atrocious dragon. He was known for being smart, not fierce and ferocious like dragons are supposed to be. He brushed his teeth every night, and when he breathed, there was no fire, just minty freshness. The dragon was very upset when they found him. "Someone's stolen my gold, and they left this note in its place," he cried. It read, "Your gold is with the princess. Mine it is now." "This is odd," said the hero.
Very odd,
said the villain. Said the dragon, who always flossed his teeth when he was upset. "Perhaps the queen knows something." The queen was running around the castle when they arrived. She was actually not so atrocious. She hired the royal scribes. My treasures are missing, she cried. My books and jewels and fine silk. Someone has taken them and left this atrocious note. It read, Your treasure is mine. Don't trying to bother find it. Whoever has stolen your treasure has the princess, said the hero. Here are some flowers, said the villain. Look, said the dragon. There are footprints of dirt on the floor. They followed the footprints all the way up to the tallest tower in the tallest part of the castle. When they looked inside, they found all the gold, books, jewels, and silk covered in dirt. And sitting on a throne on top of the pile was the princess. Why did you steal these things? Asked the queen. I didn't want to go to my riding lessons, said the princess. Who needs it? You do, said the queen. The villain, knight, and dragon all agreed. The princess had to return what she had stolen, apologize, and go to her lessons 6 days a week. She was an atrocious student when they began, but she got better each day. It took the dragon hours to brush all the dirt off his coins. The villain developed a taste for soggy cookies and baked them all the time. The hero decided it was finally time to battle the butterfly, and lost. The queen insisted that the entire atrocious tale be written inside of one of her muddy books. I warned you this book was atrocious, and now it is over. Perhaps one day you could write a better one. Hello, I'm an author, and this is my book. Thank you. Oh, thank you for taking a look. It's so nice to meet you. What is your name? How wonderful. I wish that mine was the same. This book has no pictures. It only has words. Pictures are silly. They're just for the birds. Hey, who let you in? This book's not for you. I do not have room for you. Go away. Shoo! What are you doing? It looks pretty fun. I'm here with my friend. They're my very best one. I could play too, maybe. Think they'd agree? Probably not. They're quite picky, you see. I'll ask, but I'm warning, I think they'll say no. In fact, yes, it's best if instead you just go. I'll just wait here, if you'll ask them for me. Oh, I hope they say yes. We'd have such fun, us three. Humph. Would you tell them about all the things I would bring? Like bouncing bazobs and my flicking the ring. Okay, I will tell them, but don't make a fuss. I feel like they liked it when it was just us. Oh, will you tell them I wrote them a song?
La la, let's play. La la, we'll get along.
I'm sure it won't matter, but fine, they will know. Don't be too sad when they ask you to go. Oh, one last thing that I wish you would say. I so hope, that they have a great day. Right. Well then, dear reader, it's time that you chose. Do you want a drawing? Who's not wearing clothes? With lots of strange things? And a not-so-good voice? To be in our book? It is really your choice. Great! I will tell him to pack up his stuff. What was that? Oh, I guess words aren't enough. Woohoo! It's just, I can't draw, and I wish that I could. Why don't you try? Oh, I wish that you would. Me? No, I couldn't. I'm not very good. If that's all that's stopping you, really, you should. Okay then, here goes. It's the best I can do. He looks, well, I'll say, just a little like you. He is perfect! You mean it? He's perfect, it's true! He'll join us in here. He could be our friend too. Thank you! Why, thank you! I do what I can. What a great way for our story to end. Psst. Hey, dear reader, you're still my best friend. The Great Hill by Daniel Errico and illustrated by Dawn Hill. Before time was time, there was a great hill, and on the great hill there lived the Yolks. The Yolks spent their entire lives climbing the great hill, trying to reach the top. Some Yolks climbed fast. Some Yolks climbed slowly. One Yolk in particular was a very slow climber. He was different than the rest of the Yolks. When he climbed, all the other Yolks passed him. It was hard for him to watch them pass by. He felt like the worst climber in the world. Some Yolks made fun of him as they passed. Others didn't. Some Yolks wanted to help him climb, but he didn't let them. It was hard for him to climb. It was even harder when it rained, because the ground got slippery. Sometimes it seemed like it was only raining on him. But it wasn't. There were times when he felt like he wasn't moving at all. But he was. Then one day he met another Yolk, who climbed even slower than he did. He helped the slower Yolk climb. "Thank you," said the slower Yolk. "You're welcome," said the slow Yolk. "I can't be of much help to anyone else, since I climb so slowly." "Slowly?" asked the slower Yolk. "Well, yes. I watch the other Yolks pass me all the time. I do not know if you are slow or fast, but I do know that you help me, and that you are still climbing." The slow Yolk said goodbye to the slower Yolk, and kept climbing. Still climbing, he thought to himself. That is true. And he smiled. So the Yolk kept climbing. He climbed when it was nice out, he climbed when it rained, and he even climbed when it snowed. As he kept climbing, he got better and better. Sometimes he would pass other Yolks, and sometimes they would pass him. He had stopped paying attention. He also noticed that some Yolks were no longer climbing. When a Yolk stops climbing, it stays where it is. Some Yolks stop climbing because they are happy with how far they've gone. Others stop climbing because they don't want to climb anymore. The Yolks that had stopped climbing did not like to be passed, and they made it harder to get by. But the Yolk kept climbing, right over them. There were still times when the Yolk thought he was climbing an impossible hill, but he kept climbing. Always, always climbing. Do you think he made the top?